Hi guys, in this video I wanted to try doing something a little bit different. Obviously our channel is primarily films and TV, but music is a big part of our lives, so I thought what better time to start exploring that side of things in a video than by doing a video on my top albums of 2017. Obviously if you follow our social media accounts you'll know that we do post a fair bit of stuff about music, but we've never really put anything up on the channel. And I really do think that's a missed opportunity because music is a really important thing to me. In 2017, I really tried to broaden my horizons. I was one of those people who quite often just go back and keep listening to the same stuff over and over again. But this year I've really tried to stay informed in the music world and kind of take a lot of recommendations, see what was being critically acclaimed, was getting good reviews, and listen to it because I don't really have any music taste. If something is good, I will listen to it. I don't really gravitate towards any single genre. So I ended up listening to a really expansive array of really diverse music in 2017. And I want to talk about what was some of my favorite, or the stuff that I at least kind of valued the most. A lot of the stuff on this list will be stuff that has popped up on other people's lists because it is critically acclaimed. It's good, that's why it's on here. But this is kind of the music that I value the most. But before starting off the actual list and kind of talking about those albums that ranked inside my top 10, there are 4 albums that I do want to mention. These albums here. I'd also like to particularly point out that Sire by Jaden Smith is one of my most listened to albums of the year, but I think it's really all over the place. It's kind of opening, the Blue opening with that 4-track kind of Odyssey is absolutely spellbinding. It's some of my favorite stuff of the year, but the album overall has far too much going on in it and it needed to be cut down and reshaped to be a much tighter, more focused album. So that was so close to being on the list, but it's unfortunately just got too much kind of messiness towards the back end of it. So starting off at number 10 is The Canyon by The Used. Now the experience of listening to this album was a strange one because it sounded incredibly familiar. I was like, have I heard this band before? Why does something about this just trigger something? There's like a memory here. So I kind of went back and explored some of their older stuff, and it's like, they're one of the kind of emo rock bands I used to listen to in high school. But with this album, it's kind of such a departure from that sound while still being fundamentally them. This album has a really interesting matured effect, seeing a band go from kind of not one extreme to the other, but kind of evolve and grow as they've aged and as they've experienced more in the world. And you definitely get a sense of that with the incredible opening track here, which was filled with just this heart-rending kind of sense of mourning. I mean, I don't really want to spoil the album if you haven't hit it already because it's quite like incredible from the start. But this album really had a lot of different things where it was almost kind of like more pop influenced. It was really experimental at points. It was actually life affirming, which was really interesting coming from a band that had felt like they were really the opposite of that before. It sounds like every kind of member here found something in life that they were really all about, and that's the kind of album they made. It's kind of a celebration of life, and that's why it's here on this list. At number 9 we have Tyler the Creator's Scumfuck Flower Boy, or just Flower Boy as I believe it is now referred to. This album really took me by surprise because I had been a fan of Tyler's stuff. I hadn't really delved too far into it, but there was a lot of singles that I was definitely a fan of. I was an avid follower of his show on Adult Swim called LORDE Squad. I really like his sense of humor. But this album here, it's so not kind of what I expected from Tyler. Not only does this have a beautiful kind of summer overture type production, it's got this really like elemental sounding. It kind of captures that Flower Boy thing that he's got going on in the title there. But the contrast between the way this album sounds musically compared to Tyler's vocals on it is really stunning. And the actual kind of contradictions and the contrast and the juxtapositions between tracks was incredibly thrilling. Every single time I listened to it, actually, there's a great kind of flow between tracks like Boredom. Going from that track into I Ain't Got Time, I thought was incredibly creative, and the album finds a way to do that across the board. It's actually a lot less kind of bangery than I was expecting. It's really kind of soulful and internal, even though when it does go for the tracks like Who Dat Boy, they are absolutely phenomenal. It's just a really listenable album, and even though I think there's a couple of features here and there that may actually detract from the overall tone of the album, I really am stunned by it from start to finish, and it is an album that I keep on going back to. In my 8th spot, I have Masseduction by St. Vincent. This is the first full St. Vincent album I had listened to. Jay has been a massive fan of St. Vincent for ages. but when I saw how well reviewed this album was, I was like, I have to give it a try. And I'm so glad I did, because there is another pop record on this list that is very much in the same kind of, the same caliber, but this is kind of what I expect from a good pop record. When you're listening to mainstream radio these days, there's just so much trash, and this really does feel like an album that, especially when you hit it in its complete form. I mean, song by song, this thing is incredible, with some incredibly kind of catchy tunes going on, and some great vocals. I really, really love St. Vincent's sound and the kind of different places she can go. But I think when you cop this album as a whole, it just has a fantastic overall feeling to it. I remember messaging my kind of friends that are more into music when I first started listening to it, going like, it's just filling my ears with sound. It was just a really, really gorgeous listen, and every time I go back to it, it's just an album that's a lot of fun, even though it does have a lot of emotional kick to it. And I really, really enjoy it. Now, I want to thank Jay for getting me onto this next album, which is The Underside of Power by ALGIERS. This is one of those albums that, I love an album that kind of kicks the door down when you start listening to it. It's like, hello, strap yourself in, we're going on a ride here that's going to be incredibly full on. And that's what I got with this album. It's a sound that was really unique. I haven't really heard anything sounding quite like it before. This kind of wailing, trembling, kind of guttural vocals, and I guess just the sound of it in general is incredibly unique. It does definitely feel like a kind of, not like a protest album, but it feels like really relevant to the time. It's got this kind of uprising feeling to it that you feel like it's a call to action. And it's just, yeah, there's no other way to put it than I think it's incredibly kind of visceral. It comes from like a really, really deep place. The kind of thing I want to listen to and just give out like a primal yell while listening to it. I'm just a really, really big fan of this one. In my fifth spot, I have V by The Horrors, or it might be called 5, depending on how, is that a Roman numeral? I don't know, I should have looked this up. There is probably no album this year that has as much consistency as this one. While other albums on my list kind of have points where they're like, they go from being amazing to great, to incredible. This one kind of sits at just a fantastic level the whole time. From the starting track to the final track, I was absolutely hooked by where this album goes. Certain tracks on it, like Machine, Something to Remember Me By, I really, really love. It's kind of got this modern kind of 80s feel about it. It's got a lot of music that I have listened to from the 80s in terms of, I guess, the vocalization and I guess just the sound of it in general, but it feels advanced, it feels evolved. It is just so incredibly catchy, and it's got just this really incredible punch to it. I don't know if I've fully accessed everything that this album is about, but even just from an aesthetic level, I am absolutely thrilled every time I listen to this thing. Oh no, I said number 5, and that was my number 6 spot, so number 5? No, my actual number 5 is Melodrama by LORDE. Again, this is the first time I've listened to a LORDE album in full. Jay has been a long-time LORDE fan. I had liked some of the other stuff I'd heard from her previously, but again, this was an album when I saw the reviews, I saw how kind of critically praised it was. I was like, I have to hit this thing up. And I was hooked from like the first, like the first second of this thing. It's got an incredible kind of flow to it, this incredible feeling. It's so intimate, and yet it's completely capable of being like, yep, this is going to be a pop banger right here, with certain songs like Green Light and Perfect Places and Homemade Dynamite, which is probably my favorite track on the album. I just really, really like the sound of this thing. It sounds unique. It sounds like something in pop that is produced by people who are trying to be creative, trying to do something different while still fitting in with what's accepted as mainstream music. As an actual experience, I really, really enjoy listening to this album from start to finish. There's an incredible level of growth, particularly when you go back and listen to LORDE's previous stuff. It really does feel like she took the time to evolve her sound, evolve her worldview, gain experience of how she sees the world. So I think overall that just wraps up into a really tidy, neat, succinct, and just incredibly enjoyable album. I'm sweating a bit. This Australian summer is really doing me in. Oh my god! And in my fourth spot, I have an album that I feel like I've probably listened to more than any other album this year, mainly because of just how streamlined, compact, and explosive it is. Of course, I'm talking about Vince Staples' Big Fish Theory. This is an album that feels like it's from another dimension, another time. I feel like I'm listening to something that was made in 2027. Vince was 23 when he made this album, and yet it sounds completely futuristic. I quite often say to my kind of more musically orientated friends when we talk about music that rap has this massive disparity right now between the people who are really pushing the envelope and trying to explore big ideas in kind of newer ground, and these people who are kind of just towing the line and making stuff that they know will play at a club because it's accessible and it's easy and there's nothing new being done here. Vince is like leaps and bounds ahead of the guys who are actually pushing the envelope. This album has a sound that I feel like I've never ever heard before. He attacks this thing so aggressively. It really does kind of blow my mind every time. This is the kind of album that I listen to when I want to get hyped up for something, when I'm at the gym, when, you know, you're running late to get somewhere and you're like, hey, I need something that's going to make me feel like I'm going like 1,000 miles an hour. You put this thing in and you're like, ah! I really have no better way of explaining this thing other than it is just a complete blast, start to finish. I love how focused he is on the thematic through line here. He really feels like he knew what he was going to talk about and he just went out and made it happen, and it's an absolute just, it is a blast from start to finish.
I was up late night balling, counting up hundreds by the thousands. I was up late night balling, counting up hundreds by the thousands. I was up late night.
At number 3, we have the brand new album by Brand New called Science Fiction. This album here kind of struck me with its kind of grungier vibe. It's almost reminded me of kind of a Nirvana type thing, and yet is completely its own. From the first track, Lit Me Up, I was completely hooked. This is another album this year which does not have a single track on it that is not exceptional. The range and of stuff that they explore and the depth of it is stunning. As kind of a rock record, it really does feel like something that I haven't really heard before. I think I've heard other albums that have kind of tried to go to this place and haven't quite achieved it. But this really does feel incredible to me. I form an incredible connection to it every time I listen to it. That connection just continues to grow stronger just because it is such an emotional ride, such a kind of intellectual ride. I really feel it's really quite mentally stimulating with the ideas. I always feel like I'm able to access new stuff every time I go back to it. And it truly is one of my top albums of the year. Now in my number 2 spot is probably the most critically acclaimed album of the year. I feel it's the album that everyone was talking about, everyone was listening to. Of course I am talking about Kendrick Lamar's Damn. I don't really think I've listened to a more perfect album than this in my life. It really is just perfectly made. Such a great choice of collaborators working on this thing to kind of give it the incredible quality that it has. I think what this album really succeeds with, it's my favourite Kendrick album overall, even though I don't know if it actually contains my favourite tracks, because I think a lot of those are still on Good Kid, Mad City. But this album feels less of like Kendrick's personal experience of the world as he's seeing it. I mean, other people may feel differently about this, but I feel like this is him looking at ideas that affect more than just the world that he grew up in, the world that he's familiar with. Now he's looking at America as a whole. And kind of approaching it from his thing, and it's the thing about Kendrick that I really love, is his ability to switch perspectives. So often when you listen to just musicians in general, it so feels like we're hearing their stance on things, them talking about what they're doing. Kendrick takes this stance on this thing where it feels like he's looking over these ideas as a whole, and he's kind of just exploring it for everything for what it is. Again, some really, really great some features here, particularly the U2 feature I was really stunned by. I think the track that they feature on was incredible. Favorite track on the album probably comes down to being, it switches all the time because every single track here is so phenomenally good, but the track that really, really takes me every time is Love. I think because I'm not a Drake fan, but I feel like that song takes the Drake sound and does it better than Drake ever could. It really is just an album that I feel is monumental. It is so of its time. It is so important. It is so essential. It is so deep and twisted and dark, and yet so life-affirming. It's such an interesting exploration. I really truly am in love with this album. So then, what could my #1 album of the year be? I feel like I've covered most of the stuff that was critically acclaimed throughout the year, most of the stuff that was really broadly loved. I do think Damn is probably the best album of the year. Like, if I'm talking kind of objectively, I think that album kind of cannot be matched in terms of quality. But there's another album, or 3, because I'm going to cheat here, that I connected with more than I think I've ever connected with anything musically ever. I am talking about the Saturation Trilogy by Brockhampton. I didn't know what to expect when I first sat down to kind of listen to Saturation 1. And by the time it ended, I had gone on some form of journey that I felt was incredibly personal to me. It connected with me really deeply. But Brockhampton, not only does their sound, like watching a band evolve that quick, I just want to say first of all, they released 3 albums in the space of 6 months. Hearing their evolution, hearing them get better and better as they went along was truly incredible. That's why I'm including this thing in a single project, because it's 3 albums in 1 year. It's 15 members are working to make this project, which is more than just the music. They definitely stand for an idea, and obviously there's all the creative stuff with the films that they make and whatnot. But I think the thing with Brockhampton is really the idea of them, what they stand for, putting these people together, these young people with all these ideas that are just overflowing and just letting them create, just really pushing to they kind of live their dreams. And I guess that's not necessarily talking about the music, which in its own right I'm stunned by. They take influences from everywhere, so many different tracks, hearing so many different things. The vocal capabilities of the group, there's 7 vocalists: Amir, Matt, Merlin, Dom, Joba, Kevin, Bareface. That's all of them, correct? I didn't miss anyone. Those 7 vocalists, including the incredible producers involved in the group, are really making some of the most interesting, unique sounding songs of the year. I'm talking about tracks like Boogie. I'm talking about tracks like Sister/Nation, like Gold, like Bleach, like Gummy, like Junkie. I mean, every single song they have made, I'm completely in love with. If I was to put down what my track of the year, what my song of the year is, it is Face off their first album. I think Saturation 3 was the best of the trilogy in terms of diversity, in terms of structure. The flow but from song to song is incredible. I really loved the kind of internationally inspired sound of Saturation 2, and with Saturation 1, just the sincerity pouring out, particularly towards the end of that album, with these people really laying themselves kind of bare. And I think that's the thing, they really are, I don't feel like they're playing characters. I feel like they're just being themselves and different aspects of themselves, and I feel like Brockhampton now, by the end of this year, is one entity with so many different facets, so many different personality traits embodied by each of the different members in each of the different roles. That is kind of why I think the Saturation Trilogy is my top albums of the year. That it's the top project of the year, at least. I really think if you guys haven't listened to this, you definitely should, particularly if you're around about my age. If you're in your 20s, I think, if you're in your teens, I think you might actually really get a lot out of what these guys have to offer. So I definitely suggest check them out. Brockhampton has produced the best stuff of the year for me. Alright, so we got there in the end. Once again, a video that was way longer than I expected, but I love talking about the stuff I love. Heading into 2018, I'm going to be doing a lot of video essay related stuff. If this video is popular, if you like hearing me talk about music, I'm cool to try talking about some music related stuff in video essays, doing more music related stuff on the channel, perhaps a monthly video talking about what I've listened to in the month. If you guys are interested in that, let me know. Also, let me know in the comment section below what your favorite albums of the year were. I'm interested in hearing some of the other stuff that you guys have listened to. There was a lot of stuff, obviously, that wasn't included on this list list that I really like. Maybe we have some more stuff that wasn't mentioned here that actually lines up with each other. Maybe you completely disagree with my list. Not that disagreeing with someone's own subjective thoughts on something, I just always find that weird. But anyway, head down to the comments, let me know what you thought of this video, let me know what you thought of my list, and I do want to hear what your list is. Jay is probably going to be doing his own video. We do have very similar kind of albums on our list, but just in drastically different orders, so there was no way we could do it in one video. He will do his video at some point, I'm sure. If you like this video, if you're new to our channel and you want to see more from us, you can hit our subscribe button to do that, and you can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter, all at Breaking Banter. Happy New Year, guys. You will see more from us soon.